Harriet Bloom knelt among the flourishing daisies in her cottage garden, her trowel glinting under the mellow afternoon sun. She had lived in Marigold Mews for nearly 3 decades now, delighting in her early morning routine of trimming hedges, feeding the songbirds, and carefully cultivating bright specks of colour wherever she could. Her garden had long been the envy of her neighbours, particularly her champion roses, which never seemed to wilt. As she weeded the corner patch near her low stone wall, her fingertips brushed something brittle and papery. At first she assumed it was an old seed packet, but curiosity made her dig just a bit further, where she unearthed a bundle wrapped in yellowing plastic. Carefully, Harriet loosened the tight knot, only to discover that she held a sheaf of newspaper clippings, their edges browned with time. Who would bury newspaper clippings among her flower beds? Harriet's first instinct was to dismiss them. Perhaps they were tossed by mistake, or left after some teenage prank decades ago. But the bold headlines on each slip of paper spoke to something far more intriguing. She could make out words like disappearance. Her excitement mounted. Marigold Mews was known for its tranquil days and neighbourly gossip, but dramatic mysteries rarely unfurled beneath its primly trimmed hedgerows. With gloved hands, Harriet brushed off the dusty shreds of soil. She laid the clippings on a clean patch of her apron and read through as carefully as the faded print allowed. The snippets ranged in date from over 50 years ago. One article, from September 1968, mentioned a woman named Eloise Parker who had supposedly vanished under suspicious circumstances. Another, dated January 1970, detailed a scandal involving Alderman Theo Albright, who had championed a new community library but faced accusations about redirected funds. Harriet folded the clippings one by one, feeling that odd tingle of curiosity and concern. What connected these stories, if anything? Did they point to separate misdeeds, or were they strands of the same web? Rising to her feet, Harriet felt her knees creak in protest. She tucked the bundle under her arm, deciding to retreat to her kitchen, where she could examine them more thoroughly over a cup of chamomile tea. Late that afternoon, Harriet sat at her pine dining table, the kettle whistling in the background. She carefully flattened each article on its surface. Though the print was blurred by age, she recognized some names. Albright was an old, established name in Marigold Mews. There was still an Albright Lane near the town hall. There was also reference to the Quill and Cup Cafe, an establishment that still served some of the best pastries Harriet had ever tasted. The mention of Eloise Parker was less familiar to her, but Harriet did recall hearing the Parker name in passing gossip at the garden club. Could someone in the Parker or Albright family still live in the community? Harriet's mind buzzed with ideas. If there was a deeper local scandal, many of her older neighbours might remember it. The first person who came to mind was Harriet's friend, Ida Farnsworth, an 82-year-old widow who had been in Marigold Mews for nearly her entire life. Ida had always been an unwavering vault of local history, from who'd had the largest vegetable garden to which family had owned the venerable shoe shop on Main Street in 1950. Ida also enjoyed the occasional rumour that she liked to glean small tidbits from passers-by who assumed she was just a sweet and slightly forgetful old lady. Harriet knew she had to pay Ida a visit first. She wrapped the fragile clippings in tissue paper, just as she would a precious pressed flower, then fit them into an old stationery box for safekeeping. After finishing her tea, she set off down the lane toward Ida's snug little home. Ida's cottage smelled of lavender and lemon verbena, the comforting fragrance surrounding embroidered cushions and meticulously polished wooden floors. When Harriet produced the newspaper clippings, Ida's sharp eyes glinted, revealing a youthful curiosity beneath her gentle features. Ida carefully turned each clipping over in her pale, wrinkled fingers. "Oh, my," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I'd almost forgotten about dear Eloise Parker." Ida paused, lost in memory. Her father ran the Parker candy shop on Maple Street, used to give free lemon drops to children on Sundays, but Eloise, She was bright and social, always a bit of a magnet for attention. Then, out of nowhere, she left for the city, or so it was said, but many suspected something else. As for Alderman Albright, Ida frowned. It was rumored that he helped fund the new library in a questionable way. Money that might not have been entirely his to give. Harriet could practically feel the excitement buzzing in her veins. The old library sat at the edge of the main street, a low brick structure that had been around for decades, though it had undergone expansions. She recalled hearing that Albright's name was engraved on a plaque near the entrance, recognizing his role for the significant donation. Ida's memory suggested the donation was considered suspicious, but Harriet was unaware of any official censure. "Did the scandal make local headlines?" Harriet asked, pointing at the crumbling scraps of old newsprint. Ida sighed. "I believe so, but it never led to legal charges. There were rumors in the tavern that some hush money went around, or that certain key pieces of evidence, like records showing missing town funds, were lost. But around that time, Eloise vanished. The town rumored she might have been a whistleblower or discovered something she shouldn't have. Others claimed she just ran away to avoid a scandal involving Albright. One never could tell." Ida's gaze followed the lines of a forest green rug underfoot, as though searching for clarity in the swirling pattern. "It's been so long. People either forgot or chose not to speak of that time. It was easier to let sleeping dogs lie, you know." Convinced that there was a tangle of events waiting to be unravelled, Harriet decided her next stop should be the actual library. Even if the older records were incomplete or scattered, she might find more references in the local archives. The Albright donation plaque loomed in her mind. If the missing funds and Eloise's disappearance were connected, perhaps Harriet could glean something from the library's historical files. Early the next morning she arrived at the library, greeted by Mrs. Pettigrew, the silver-held librarian whose quiet exterior belied a rigorous mind. Inside the hushed reading room, Harriet explained her curiosity in gentler terms. She was exploring some local history and had stumbled across references to old news. "We do keep decades' worth of archived newspapers on microfilm," Miss Pettigrew explained. "Just let me know which years you'd like, and I'll gather the reels for you." Harriet reeled off dates around 1968 through the early 1978, trying to pinpoint the prime period for Eloise's disappearance and Albright's rumoured misconduct. Soon enough, Harriet was settled at a microphone reader in a corner of the reading room, the bright screen casting a faint glow across her face. Scrolling through the archives, she encountered mentions of Eloise Parker's accomplishments, her part in the drama club, her volunteering at the local hospital. Then came a short paragraph in September 1968. Local resident Eloise Parker is believed to have left Marigold Mews to pursue a secretarial position in the city. Family members confirm her departure. Harriet frowned. The language was oddly dry, almost official in tone, as though it sought to sweep away any speculation. Next, Harriet discovered a piece hinting that Alderman Albright faced questions on how the library fund had nearly doubled overnight, allegedly from private donors. But details were scarce. Harriet could sense that relevant updates might have been withheld or destroyed. She noted a single, tantalizing line near the bottom of one article. "Miss Parker was reportedly last seen near the town hall." Harriet took careful notes and promised herself she would keep an eye out for anything referencing hush money. A polite cough startled her. Miss Pettigrew stood behind Harriet's chair, with a small manila folder in hand. "I almost forgot," she whispered. "We also keep a separate file for unsolved mysteries and local legends. It's not official, just something we librarians have maintained through the years. You might find a few more details here." Miss Pettigrew handed over the folder, which held a handful of typed notes detailing rumours of old crimes, vanishings and controversies in the region. Tucked in the back was a short note. "EP questioned Albright's finances. Went missing days later. Whispers of a meeting with Albright's secretary. Harriet's heart thumped. Here was a direct link. Eloise had apparently confronted Albright about the library funds. That confrontation might have led to trouble, possibly forcing Eloise to leave for her safety, or worse. Clutching the folder, Harriet thanked Miss Pettigrew and bounded out of the library. She made a mental list of everyone in town old enough to recall that era. Perhaps she could piece together more about Eloise's final days in Marigold Mews. It struck Harriet that any scandal large enough to be buried might have had multiple participants or onlookers. Eloise's father had passed away years beyond Harriet's memory. Albright himself was long deceased, survived by a daughter, Marjorie, who still lived a few streets away. Harriet had seen Marjorie around, a smartly dressed, somewhat reserved woman in her 50s, known for hosting refined tea gatherings. If she possessed any knowledge of her father's rumoured scandal, Harriet would have to navigate the conversation delicately. Later that afternoon, Harriet gathered her courage and walked the short distance to Marjorie Albright's tall stone house. Ivy climbed across the carefully pointed walls, giving the place a sense of dignified age. Marjorie opened the front door, blinking in polite surprise to see Harriet with her stationery box in hand. She invited her inside, leading Harriet to a parlour adorned with tasteful paintings and shining mahogany furniture. "I'm doing some research on local history," Harriet began gently. "I found some old newspaper clippings about your father's donation to the library." She paused, watching Marjorie's face for any reaction. Marjorie's cool composure softened just a hint. "People still talk about that?" she asked in a weary voice. "I was very young at the time, but I remember bits and pieces." "My father was proud of that donation, but he also had a reputation for strong, sometimes intimidating tactics in business. Some folks assumed the worst about him, and rumours spread." Harriet nodded sympathetically, encouraging Marjorie to go on. "I used to hear whispered talk about a girl, Eloise, who was said to cause a stir. I never quite understood it. Father preferred not to discuss such things in front of me. Whenever I asked, he'd say it was nonsense, that the matter was resolved. I suppose what truly happened is lost to time." "Mother didn't speak of it at all." Seeing no immediate doors closing, Harriet gently mentioned the suggestion that Eloise confronted Alderman Albright about missing funds. She asked if Marjorie knew if Eloise had truly run away. "If there was a confrontation, it happened in private," Marjorie replied, brow furrowed. "In the end, Father told me she left for better job opportunities. He acted so certain, but perhaps that was just an official story. Father had the gift of persuasion. He might have convinced her to accept hush money or something similar." Marjorie sighed and stared out her window, as though seeking answers in the ivy-laced garden. "I was too frightened to press him. He could be quite stern, and I was only a child." Despite her gentle persistence, Harriet gained no further clarity from Marjorie. Still, she sensed that Albright's daughter had shared all she sincerely knew. An odd sadness had settled in the corners of Marjorie's eyes, as if she too yearned for resolution to a decades-old riddle. Harriet thanked her for her time and left, feeling no closer yet to the truth. She wandered down the quiet street, turning the puzzle over in her mind. Eloise had disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The library funds had soared unexpectedly. Articles in the local newspaper hinted at a scandal, only to be abruptly quieted. Who would want to bury these clippings in Harriet's flower bed? And why now? It was then that a passing memory made Harriet stop short. She recalled how old Mr. Whitcomb at the Horticultural Club had once told her that the flower beds near her wall dated back to the Parker family's occupation of that cottage in the 1970s. Harriet had purchased her home from their distant relatives, who had apparently inherited it after the immediate Parkers had moved on or died. Could it be that someone buried those clippings there long ago, maybe even Eloise's mother or a family friend, hoping that future generations wouldn't forget the truth? Harriet felt a strange chill despite the warm day. Perhaps the hidden clue had lain dormant all this time, waiting to be rediscovered. Determined to see this through, Harriet decided she needed to speak directly with anyone who might have known Eloise in the flesh. One name stood out: Lucy Townsend, a proudly spry 78-year-old volunteer at the Historical Society. Ida Farnsworth had once mentioned that Lucy and Eloise were classmates in secondary school. Lucy lived in a sunlit cottage on the edge of Marigold Mews, whose wide porch overlooked rolling fields. Harriet made her way there, brimming with anticipation, and hoping Lucy's recollections would be more personal and revealing than yellowed clippings. Lucy greeted Harriet warmly, offering a seat on the wicker chairs and pouring out tall glasses of iced tea. When Harriet mentioned Eloise Parker's name, Lucy's face lit up in a wistful smile. "Eloise was the brightest star in our little group," Lucy said, "so vibrant, ready to take on the world. But she got tangled in grown-up politics too soon. She used to help her father in the candy shop, and that brought all sorts of people in. One day, she overheard a conversation, something about funds for the library not adding up. Being tenacious, she confronted Alderman Albright, believing that the truth should always come out. But the scuffle was hushed. Eloise wasn't the type to scare easily, though. Leaning forward, Harriet finally dared to ask, "What do you think happened to her? Did she truly leave town willingly?" Lucy dabbed at her forehead with a napkin. "She left, that much I know, but not without a forced understanding. There was a rumor they offered her money, or threatened her. I heard she boarded a train late at night, after one last meeting at Town Hall. She never told me she was leaving. I discovered it the next day. I think, in the end, she realized that going public would cost her family everything. Her father's business was struggling, and she didn't want to destroy them. So she quietly disappeared." Lucy sighed, eyes glistening. "No one ever saw her again. For years I waited for a letter or postcard. I even wrote her. Nothing. I worried something happened on that train or in the city. The pieces of this puzzle were forming a picture. Eloise, an idealist, might have discovered that Alderman Albright's large donation was, in fact, repurposed money from the town's budget. She tried to do the right thing, but found herself cornered by threats or bribes." Harriet felt a pang of sadness for Eloise's predicament. "Thank you," she told Lucy softly. "I'm sorry if this stirs up old worries." Lucy nodded, grateful to finally talk about her friend after so long. Harriet promised to keep searching, hoping for an epilogue that would allow Eloise's story to rest in peace. Back at her cottage that evening, Harriet stepped out into her garden, the same patch where she'd found the buried clippings. The moon shone gently over her flowering shrubs. Harriet felt that in a town as small and tight-knit as Marigold Mews, there must be a reason someone dug up the past right here. She retrieved a small spade and turned up the soil more thoroughly. After several moments of gentle searching, she unearthed a small metal box, rusted at the hinges, but surprisingly intact. Carefully, Harriet pried it open. Inside lay a short letter, sealed in an oilskin pouch, along with an old photograph of a smiling young woman in a polka-dot dress. Harriet guessed at once this was Eloise. Intrigued, she slipped the letter from its fragile envelope. The handwritten script was faint, addressed, "To whomever finds this." The letter, signed by Eloise Parker, described the events that forced her from Marigold Mews. "I cannot remain silent about what I saw, yet I cannot expose it without harming my family. Alderman Albright misused the funds meant for our school and nursing home expansions, funneling them into the library to bolster his reputation. When I confronted him, he threatened me. I fear for my parents' livelihood. I will leave, and hope time brings justice. Perhaps one day the truth will help set things right. Remember that a conscience, once stirred, should never be buried permanently." Tears gathered at Harriet's eyes as she carefully read the final, slightly smudged words. This was the confirmation that Eloise had tried her best to stand up for what was right. Harriet's heart ached for the young woman who had given up her home for the sake of protecting her parents and possibly preserving her own life. Yet Harriet also felt satisfaction in uncovering Eloise's truth, giving new air to a secret that had languished for decades. For the next few days, Harriet pondered how to best handle Eloise's confession. She consulted quietly with Ida Farnsworth and Lucy Townsend, who both encouraged Harriet to bring it to the local council, or perhaps the town's current mayor. "Better late than never," Ida said, her voice quavering with emotion. "Our community prides itself on honesty, but we can't ignore the mistakes of the past." Harriet gathered the letter, the photograph, and the yellowed clippings. She also compiled her own notes and a statement from Lucy Townsend, who attested to Eloise's character at that time. By the end of the week, Harriet found herself politely knocking on the office door of Mayor Young, a moderate, level-headed woman who had ushered in many positive changes for Marigold Mews. Mayor Young met Harriet's gentle manner with gratitude and genuine concern. She listened intently as Harriet laid out the entire story of disappearing budget lines, threatened whistleblowers, and an entire scandal hidden just beneath the bright surface of the library's origin story. "I can't rewrite the official records from 50 years ago," Mayor Young said, her voice thoughtful, "but I can ensure that Eloise Parker's attempt to stand for honesty is recognized. She deserves that much." True to her word, Mayor Young convened a small luncheon at the town hall one afternoon, open to all residents who might recall those events. Harriet attended with Ida and Lucy, each trembling with a mixture of pride and relief. On a wooden easel stood Eloise's photograph, framed and newly restored. Mayor Young read aloud excerpts from Eloise's letter. A hush fell over the gathering as a piece of the community's history was finally brought to light. Though no formal legal action could be taken now, the municipal record was amended, noting that Albright's library donation came under suspicion and that Eloise Parker's name should be honored as someone who sought truth, even if it cost her everything. In the weeks that followed, Harriet quietly returned the photograph and letter to Lucy Townsend for safekeeping at the Historical Society. Lucy placed them in a new archival box, ensuring they would remain accessible to future generations. There would be no more burying of these headlines. As for Harriet's garden, she found herself looking at it with fresh eyes. She imagined how, over the decades, secrets had literally fertilized her lovely flowers. Now, the truth had at last bloomed, a testament to the quiet perseverance of honest hearts in Marigold Mews. Summer slid toward early autumn. The daisies in Harriet's garden began to droop, making way for the vibrant chrysanthemums she tended so carefully. Harriet felt a newfound kinship with the soil beneath her feet, aware that even the smallest patch of earth might hold stories waiting to be unearthed. The hush of a late September morning found Harriet in exactly the same place she'd started, kneeling in her flower bed, trowel in hand. Yet the world around her, the veiled past of her sweet little town, felt somehow changed. She thought of Eloise Parker, of the bravery behind that polka-dot smile. A sense of peace came over Harriet, knowing she had done her part to honor truth. Whatever the future held for Marigold Mews, the scandal of bygone years no longer lay buried among the marigolds, but shone in the open air, an old tale resolved at last. And with that, Harriet smoothed the soil, feeling the warm sun on her back, and knew her garden had never seemed so alive.